Hello, ladies and gentlemen. I am Rob here in my lair once more, and I am coming here with humility in my heart and remorse because I have fallen off of what was a very good practice. My State of the Dungeon address helped keep my game on par. My players could just look at my video and know what happened the session before, and that was a very good thing. I also love the idea of keeping a record of what happens game after game after game. The problem with that, if you slip, you've got work to make up. And on top of the other videos that I enjoy making, rehashing adventure notes can be a little bit of a chore, no matter the benefit. If they pile up, it gets pretty brutal. But I am excited and engaged in my hobby, and it's something I want to do and I will do. So, without further ado, I have a lot of catching up to do. I have a couple of State of the Dungeons that I have put out from the end of 2017, bringing up to the beginning of 2018. But after the middle of January, here it is, we are in June. 5 months. Not good. A lot has happened in that time. So, we will be doing summary State of the Dungeons that encapsulate several months. Now, we only play mostly twice a month. So it's not like I've got 20 sessions that I'm catching up on. That being said, the first campaign that we did, or when I ended my prior State of the Dungeon addresses, we were winding down the Werewolves of the Caribbean Chronicle. So then we moved to the Warhammer 40,000 Adeptus Arbites campaign that I entitled The Judges. We began on January 18th. This was a not an inauspicious day. It was, it's a lot of my campaigns start at the beginning of the year. So we had, at the time, we had 4 players making up their initial characters. The character, okay, first of all, a little backstory for those who don't know Warhammer 40k. It is a game that is based off of a tabletop war game, Warhammer 40,000, which pits creatures of different races against each other in large tactical battles. Each player has an army made of so many points worth of units. The stronger units are worth more, so you can field fewer units, or you can field a lot of cheap units. Different races that you might encounter, there are humans, but humans also have superhuman champions called Space Marines, and there are different segregations and political units of those. There are the Eldar, who are basically elves in space, and the Dark Eldar, which are drow in space. But it's more complicated than that, but I'm not getting into all the fluff, especially what doesn't directly impact my game. But there are soulless space skeletons known as Necrons that try to kill all life, although they're complicated. There are orcs, spelled with a K to differentiate them from Tokenian orcs. They're huge, green, and they're kind of hybrids of plant and killing machine. They live to fight. They get stronger the more they get to fight. So, if they can't find anybody else to fight, they'll fight each other. You also have the Tyranids, which are a race of hungry space locusts. They go from planet to planet eating all biomatter and leaving the planet a dead hulk, and then moving on to the next planet. What their goals are, nobody knows. People who play Tyranids play them just to eat everybody else. And so each of these different races has things that balances them against each other. The long and short of it is they created a ton of fluff over the 30 years or so that this game has been in place. There have been a variety of interesting scenarios spun out, war themes, novels, and Fantasy Flight Games created a role-playing game. Actually, they created several, each one having a focus on a different aspect of roleplay within the universe. Almost all of them focusing on humans. The first one that came out was called Dark Heresy. Dark Heresy. One of the things with the universe is that it's a moral struggle for the souls of everybody, and for the humans especially, because there is an evil. It is a palpable evil called chaos, which struggles for the souls of men. If you want quick power, you may be able to worship chaos. It may turn you into a gibbering monstrosity, but it may actually turn you into a demon prince. So there's a chance for anybody. On the downside, you're kind of going evil, whether or not that's by spreading plague, just murdering and killing, doing drugs and sex and all the other stuff, or just spinning plans and cackling madly to yourself. So, humans are somewhat prone to this, and the governance of humanity falls upon the structure called the Imperium. At its figurehead is the Emperor, who, upon receiving mortal wounds from his son Horus, has been ensconced in life support, basically. He's a figurehead at the moment. But the rest of the Imperium chugs along as this vast machine. Part of the mechanics of the machine are called the Inquisition. They look for heresy. They look for things that aren't right. And they have the authority to do things even up to the extent of destroying entire planets to make sure that the Imperium stays intact. Dark Heresy is about the people who work for these Inquisitors. They root out heresy. They kill off the servants of chaos or aliens that are corrupting planets so that they don't have to blow up important worlds. Along the way, they take on some truly scary stuff, all the way down from minor heresy, a bunch of nobles who decided it would be fun to pose as cultists, to honest-to-goodness cultists, alien invaders, and what have you. It's a fascinating world. It's one that I enjoy. I don't play the tabletop war game. If I had, the miniatures would be a lot easier because I don't really have a lot. But it's a fascinating world. The story that I'm spinning off of this is I created my own world called Vigilance. Most of the worlds are single word synonymous with the type of travail that the planet represents. Vigilance is what is called a Forge world. It is owned by a splinter of the Imperium called the Mechanicus, the Adeptus Mechanicus, who is in charge of all of the machinery of the Imperium. They worship machinery. They think of it as having its own spirit and life, and a lot of their stuff does. Especially since there's been a fall in technology and most of them don't understand it. They just ritualize it to pass on the basic maintenance rights and activation protocols by ritualizing it. So this planet is run by them. And they're just coming out of being cut off from the Imperium by a surge in the warp, which is a alternate dimension full of energy, and it can cut off travel through space to certain areas, and this place has been silent for 100 years. Vigilance did pretty good. They were kept intact because of very strong presence by a group called the Ministorum, who is basically the Church of the Imperium. And this church kept the planet on the straight and narrow for the most part. Now, how am I spinning off this story? I am actually using a separate source book, a guidebook, source book, called the Book of Judgment. And it is about the servants of law called the Adeptus Arbites. Think Judge Dredd and you're right there. I mean, they are authorized to do anything up to summary executions to keep the populace from spinning into chaos. And not capital C, evil chaos. It's, well, that is certainly one of their mandates, but also just to stop people from rebelling and turning the planet into something that is less than what they should be for an imperial planet. It can be that some planets are governed by a single member of the Adeptus Arbites and their staff. Well, this planet just has the party. Now, they were put into an interesting scenario, but basically I wanted to explore giving them basically ultimate authority, but also being put into a very bad situation that they had to claw their way out of. They are not all trained arbitrators, the law. They are not all trained because I wanted to go with a diverse group who would be tasked to work together, bring their disparate abilities and skills together to handle a myriad of problems that maybe a team of trained arbitrators might have a more difficult time with. So, the party is made up of Ryder, who is a hive world arbitrator. He comes from a world with billions of people. One of the things humanity is really good at is procreating, making more humans. And humans are one of the cheapest resources that the Imperium has. So they have planets that are just, their whole purpose is creating more people to send off to armies, to serve as the labor for the Imperium. And these hive worlds can have hundreds of billions of people on them. They usually are in massive city structures, stacked layer upon layer upon layer, called hives. Much like, an insect hive, that is how the bulk of humanity lives in this Imperium. The advantages of coming from a hive are that you are familiar with, being in a place with lots of people. You have those kind of skills. You don't do so well when you aren't surrounded by a crush of humanity around you at all times. He is an arbitrator. He is the one who is trained in the law and carrying through on enforcing the law and the structures that they are bound by. He is de facto the team leader. There is a Rainer. He is also a hive worlder, but he's an assassin. He is basically the sniper of the group, a SWAT sniper. He eliminates things from far away, and he's quite good at it. He is also played by one of our newest members of the group, and he is much younger and less experienced than the other players, so he makes things interesting. We have Fade Ryutha, who is a Psyker. Psykers are basically what Dungeons & Dragons would have as wizards. They use psychic powers, and it's very much like casting spells. Except, there's a chance every time that they use their powers that something can go wrong, possibly culminating in their death, injury to people around them, destruction, mass chaos. It's really a double-edged sword. On the one side, you have limited resources and such, and this Psyker power gives you great potential. But when you summon demons into the real world, bad things happen. So he is very much a double-edged sword. His specialties, though, are in healing and divination. So he's the healer, and he, with a wave of his hand, can take away critical damage that somebody has taken. That's huge. On the downside, though, yeah, chaos seems to travel in his wake, and most people are, especially because the world is very much under the heel of the orthodoxy, the witch psychers are to be feared, and even though he's sanctioned and he's authorized by the Arbites to use his powers for the good of the group, the average Joe citizen doesn't see it that way. This has led to interesting situations. We also have Rax. He is a guardsman from a feral world. So he's not so civilized. He grunts a bit more, and he's used to hardships that most people can't even comprehend. As a guardsman, he was trained to be one of the many faceless people sent out in the great armies that are shipped from planet to planet, system to system, to fight in the battles that the Imperium has versus aliens versus heretic uprisings. Any kind of threat you can imagine, the Imperial Guard can be thrown into. He was rescued from what almost certainly would have been an inglorious death along in a trench on a planet somewhere by being tasked to work with the Adeptus Arbites as basically an enforcer. He's big, good at combat, and shooty. Also, later on, we got another player who was playing GPS. That's what he chose. Gippus. And he is a tech priest. Remember I said about the Adeptus Mechanicus? Well, it was relatively easy to insert him into the world when the Mechanicus run the world, and he's an available tech priest. He has mechanical bits put into him, and he's always looking to replace more of his body with mechanical bits so he can get closer to the machine god. In addition, he's very good with technology and security, which is invaluable to the group. Rounding off the group, I suppose, is Yamas, who is the GM NPC. Not a fighter by any stretch of the imagination, he is a clerk of the Administratum, the branch of the Imperium that handles keeping track of everything, the bureaucracy. So when the party desperately needs something, he puts the wheels in motion to see if he can get anything. Unfortunately, the system is stacked against him, and the characters aren't superhuman. Most of them barely can break even in likelihood of success on a fairly simple task, which means stacking up circumstances to help you out is very crucial. So he doesn't always succeed brilliantly. For example, they needed anesthetic. He accidentally got them Amasec, which was alcohol, which they didn't mind, but it wasn't the anesthetic that they needed to keep their medical bay working. So, we started out the campaign on the 18th. This is going to be a little longer, but I'm going to be going generally because I don't remember every single detail, which is the disadvantage of doing a summary that covers months' worth of gameplay. The group was kind of thrown together, and they were met by a drill sergeant and an enforcer who eventually brought them into a grand assembly. This was in... on the battleship Justice's Gavel. And they were put under the broad authority. This part of the sector is under the command of Arbitrator General Lucan Brand, who is a gruff, no-nonsense, I'm going to save this part of the Imperium from its own dissolution. And he basically pledged them to do their job. Now, they were instructed, they were in a large mass, but this whole sector had just recently been reopened. So this group was being parsed out, and their group was the team that was going to go and be the presence of the Adeptus Arbites on this world of Vigilance. To set them off, they were instructed that there were several structures that were already in place to help them out. There was, in the hive they're going to, the planet they're going to has 3 hives. The one they're going to is called Nalix. It is a workshop nation that's basically carved into fiefdoms by the specialization of the production. Each Magos in charge of a given tech fiefdom has iron control over his workers and his processes, and fights very hard to keep his secrets of process from going out to the other Magoses, which makes things very paranoid, and also make sure that all of them have a certain amount of personal military they use to guard their territory very strictly. It also means that demand for the most skilled serfs and technicians is high. So now the state of the world is that they had been making things at such a pace, mostly refined computer equipment and some of the specialized things that larger machinery needs, anything from battleships to tanks to one of them is for flusher units for space toilets. So the planet is pretty important. Now, as I said, they have a strong Ministorum presence, and there's not a lot of open heresy or revolt or anything. The people are pretty happy. Number one, the warehouses are full. This planet is looking to finally be able to offload a huge sum, a giant bolus of cargo that's going to go out and enrich the planets around. It's been sitting there idle, and the populace has had the luxury, mixed luxury, of being relatively lax on the demands for their labor. It's mostly been spent on maintenance, cataloging, organizing, recataloging, reorganizing, and so on and so forth, making sure that everything is ready to go once stuff gets picked up. The people haven't been in the best of condition because the planet had been cut off from any travel other than real-time travel, which is very slow. And the planet only has one small agri-world to feed all of these people. So many people have been on the brink of starvation for some time. So they're really happy that hopefully things will pick up. There is a a precinct fortress stabbed through the different levels of this hive for the Arbites. They used to have a very strong presence, but all the Arbites have died off in the 100 years. The group isn't positive why, and they'll uncover that as they go. But they were told, you've got a fortress, you've got the resources, you've got a place to hole up and dispense justice from, so you'll be fine. Well, as they were flying into Vigilance, they got shot down by missile defense systems, and they actually crashed through the top plate of the hive. The nose of the thing came to rest, bedded into the bottom plate of the underhive. This particular hive only has 3 levels, but they're vast. They basically fill up the continent. So they crashed into the hive, and they had an episode with a servitor. The servitors basically are the punishment people have for breaking the law, not in such a way that they be executed and made worthless, but what they do is they cut out the bits of the brain that aren't needed for anything beyond. I'm not going to get into anything too graphic, but basically they make a person useful by adding cybernetic bits and taking away the thinky parts that get them into trouble. So the cook had just enough higher brain function to store recipes and follow directions, and its attachments were things like a whisk in place of a hand, a series of serrated knives coming off of a mechadendrite coming out of the shoulder. And it went mad in the crash, which led to interesting scenarios. They tried to get out of the ship. Finally, they got out and scaled down the ship down to the underhive where the nose was resting on the ground. At the time, the tech priest was not with them. The first GM NPC I came up with was a tech priest, their liaison to the Brotherhood, the Mechanicus. So they were met, but almost as soon as they were met by the tech priest, they were under fire. Building nearby disgorged warriors who started shooting at them and into the crowd because, again, billions of people. So there were lots and lots of people down here. People were getting shot and spattered by this machine gun that they had set up called a stubber. The group fought back well. The assassin proved that he was a pretty good shot with the hunting rifle that he's carrying around. At this point, the characters have very much homemade gear. The assassin doesn't have the killer sniper rifle that he lusts after. He has a hunting rifle, much like a person in our world would be used to. It holds bullets, internal magazine, looks down a scope. The guardsman, who was the best equipped, starts out with decent but not great armor. He starts out with a las rifle, which is a decent weapon, if not fantastic. So together the group worked to fend these villains off. Eventually they retreated. And The group pulled back the tech priest GMNPC named Claros had a truck, basically. They piled into the truck, drove to the precinct house. They found out that ringing around the fortress are the statues of judges, the lawgivers of the Arbites. And also they saw this gang who was initiating somebody, and they sent this guy to go run at the fortress, and the fortress disgorged burning promethium, which is, think napalm, jet fuel, things like that. It's very burnable stuff. And he was incinerated. And they're all like, well, we don't want that to happen to us. But they had these badges which have enough technology in them to basically prove their identity. So they were able to enter the fortress. And they decided to start exploring into the fortress and try to find, the resources that they needed to equip themselves to communicate with the outside world, and possibly to reach the fortress to reach the fleet to tell them what was going on. They got into a fight with a combat servitor. I remember what I said about a servitor having a combat servitor has weapons instead of a whisk and slicing knives. They have a powerful melee weapon. I believe this one had some sort of an energy field around a fist or hammer. No, he had a long drill. I remember, and that's important. And he had an autogun, which is basically like an assault rifle, just stripped down and barrel auto-firing. The group worked together to take him down. In the process, they found out that shotguns at close range are fairly dangerous. It allows them to get extra hits if you can cause more of the shot load to be able to hit the opponent, which Ryder did by basically jamming the shotgun he started with and sending both barrels into the thing and doing some significant damage. Also, at the same time, again, the assassin proved his usefulness by shooting into the optical sensors of the combat servitor. Eventually, they took it down. However, Raynor was shot and then impaled on the drill. His armor was not significant, and the damage was pretty severe. They got a good taste of what combat is like. Some damage was spread around. They eventually found a medical facility to work on. Actually, it was Ryder who was impaled. Raynor was just shot by the autogun. Nothing too terrible. But when they were going into the infirmary, they found a number of secured medical tables. They did not have any of them any kind of medical kits or processes. One of the things is learning is in the Dark Ages, so these characters didn't know a great deal of things outside of their specialty. How to patch somebody up from a giant drill punching through their middle? Yeah, that was outside of their skill. Fortunately, Fade, his healing, was on par to keep Ryder alive. And one of the high notes of the thing, again, did say that the person playing Raynor is a bit inexperienced. In this infirmary, what they thought was an infirmary, he found a vial of medicine. Unlabeled, but a bottle of pills. So he put one in his mouth, swallowed it. And they found out that that actually wasn't an infirmary, it was a primary interrogation cell, where they would take people who were just recently apprehended. If they needed information out of them quickly rather than processing them, they could take them into this place, and those were pills that fired off all of his pain receptors at once. It was agonizing, it was brutal, he brought it completely on himself and nobody felt bad, but now he's got a bottle of torture pills and he knows what he can do with them, so hilarity ensued. So to do the summary of everything and this first night of this has been long enough. We'll continue on with their hijinks, and I think we will do the rest of it will sum up into the most recent game. That'll be about 8 sessions. And going up to the last time we played, which was the 31st of May, in preparation for the next game. So, I am Rob / OmnusI. This has been the start of the Warhammer 40k Adeptus Arbites game, The Judges, and I will talk to you next time on my State of the Dungeon. Thank you, and farewell.